We spend a lot of time learning, understanding ideas, concepts, frameworks, but there's a gap that most people never cross. The gap between understanding something and actually living it. In the language of Torah, that gap is the difference between Bina and Das. Bina is when something makes sense. Das is when what you understand and how you actually live are aligned. This series is about closing that gap, taking ideas that we understand intellectually and turning them into something real, something lived. We'll be working with Torah teachings that approach this with precision and structure. So this is not a series about inspiration. It's a series about process, a structured path from Bina to Das. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Shema podcast, another installment in our series from Bina to Das. The first time I seriously read through the Chumash, I found myself judging the people in its stories, especially Adam and Chava. How could people who lived with such spiritual clarity make such an obvious mistake? Over time, I stopped reading this story primarily as an account of other people, and I began to see it as a description of us. We can understand what is true and still live by something else. That is the problem at the center of From Bina to Das. Bina is understanding, Das is truth that has entered the person and become lived reality. The distance between them is crossed through action. This episode returns to the first place where that movement was disrupted, the encounter between the serpent and Chava. The purpose is not simply to explain why Chava ate. By tracing the sequence of the serpent's corruption, we can build a framework for recognizing the same process within ourselves today. Now the yetzer performs internally where what the serpent once did from outside. At the same time, by examining what changed through sin, we may be able to reverse engineer something of Adam and Chava's experience before it, so that we have greater clarity about the integrated human condition we are working to restore. The Torah and the commentators do not present one unified model. We will be drawing from Bereshis, Rashi, and Bereshis Rabbah, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, Rav Chaim Volozhner, Rav Zadok HaKohen, the Rambam, the Ramban, Baal Salam, and the Zohar. What follows is an interpretive synthesis. The sources establish different parts of the picture, and the Bina to Das framework organizes them into a sequence. I'd like to also pause to appreciate how extraordinary it is that Sefaria.org has gathered so much Torah now into one accessible place. Research of this kind becomes possible because we can move between the verses, midrash, commentators, later sefarim, and examine how their teachings fit together. We owe real gratitude to everyone who has helped build and maintain that resource for us today. So let's dive in. As we have studied in previous episodes, the proper order is simple. A person understands a truth, the person acts upon it. Sometimes that action is positive, doing what Hashem commands. Sometimes, as with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the correct action is restraint, refusing to act against what one knows to be true. Through action, the truth becomes part of the person. Bina becomes Das. Imagination can then give that limited truth emotional form, and reason can explain and apply it. In this order, imagination and reason serve reality. They do not create a substitute for it. The serpent intervenes between understanding and action. Chava knows that the fruit is prohibited, but the Torah does not describe her as desiring it. as the fruit has not yet been presented as necessary, beneficial, capable of completing her, or that, again, she's deficient without it. It is one prohibited object within a garden of absolute abundance. Baal Salam teaches that the will to receive is fundamental to created existence. Hashem created it in order to give goodness, and a created being must be able to receive it. But the fullest goodness cannot leave the receiver as a passive taker. The created being must be able to use free will to respond to the giver, Hashem, and become giving in return. That is why a world of choice is necessary. It gives us the opportunity not only to receive from Hashem, but to reciprocate through our own decisions. The tree of knowledge of good and evil presented Chava with that opportunity. She had received life, abundance, relationship, and purpose. By leaving one fruit untaken, she could return something to Hashem, her freely chosen restraint. The serpent distracts her from that relationship. It changes the question from how can I respond to everything Hashem has given me to what will I gain by eating and what will I lose by refusing. The choice is no longer experienced as reciprocation and relationship. It is reframed as a calculation of personal cost benefit. That change of metric is the foundation of the corruption that follows. Rav Chaim Volozher explains in Nefesh Chaim that before the sin, evil stood outside the human being. That opposing voice, therefore, had to come from outside. Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer describes Sam as riding upon the serpent, the spiritual force of opposition operating through this physical creature. Now, I am abbreviating intentionally the name, as my dear friend Rabbi Yokov Cohen explained to never pronounce such names of such entities in full, as it can draw those entities towards you. But the entity Sam that I am referring to provide some context, is the same guardian angel of Esau that Yaakov wrestled with at a later point in history. So the serpent does not begin by commanding rebellion to Hashem. What it does is it changes how Chava experiences that choice. As we follow its words, 9 distinct steps will unfold. Each one moves her further from the truth she knows and closer to an alternate reality that she will eventually embody through action. The first step is a shift in attention. The serpent asks, did Hashem really say that you may not eat from any tree of the garden? That, of course, is not what Hashem said. Adam and Chava may eat from every tree except one. Yet the question places the restriction at the center and allows the abundance of the garden to sort of recede into the backdrop. This is the first movement in the corruption. Attention is shifted from all that has been given to the one thing that has been withheld. The fruit has not yet become desirable. It's just now that the boundary of what is prohibited has become the defining feature of her relationship with Hashem. The second step is the interruption between understanding and action. Chava still knows the command, the negative mitzvah. The serpent does not erase Bina. It prevents Bina from moving directly into action by introducing another way to interpret the choice. This is the universal ongoing opening of what we now deal with as the yetzer hara. A person knows what is true, but fear, habit, desire, social pressure, inconvenience, or possible loss enters before the person acts. The question changes from what is true to what will following the truth cost me. I recognize that gap in my own life. And as one example, speaking of prohibited food, a long time had passed between when I learned that a Jew is required to keep kosher and from when I actually did start keeping kosher. And it wasn't because I decided that the mitzvah was untrue or that Hashem had not been the one to command me to keep that mitzvah. I understood what Torah required. But that understanding had to compete with other ideas I now see that the yetzer hara was putting before me. It had to compete with the foods and restaurants I had enjoyed, the effect upon my family, the work of koshering my kitchen and getting new dishes and cookware, and just the overall larger question of how much my life I was prepared to change. Bina was present, but my actions still embodied the life I had been living because I was framing the choice as not a way to fulfill my creator's will to reciprocate, but because I was doing my own cost-benefit analysis on whether or not it would benefit me. And of course, I still do that today, just with other things outside of kosher. It is our ongoing challenge. It is clearly the deceptive trick of the yetzer hara. The third step is the introduction of a competing account of reality. The serpent says, "You will not surely die," which is what Hashem told Adam would happen if they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now Hashem's word is no longer the only account before Chava. Another possibility has been placed beside it. The serpent then, and the yetzer hara with us today, does not need to prove that the truth is false. It may be just enough to make the alternative seem possible. Perhaps the consequence is exaggerated. Perhaps this case is different. Perhaps the rule does not fully apply here or apply to me. Once truth becomes one consideration among many, it loses its power to govern action. The fourth step is that the mitzvah is reframed as deprivation. The serpent continues and says, "For God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil." Rashi, drawing upon Bereshit Rabbah, explains that the serpent portrays Hashem as withholding a capacity that he himself possesses. Now, most people today do not consciously believe that Hashem is competing with them. It's just that the universal mechanism is more subtle within a particular decision. Hashem's will begins to feel opposed to something the person believes is necessary for their security or success or dignity, relationship, or some type of other fulfillment. A person offered a major business opportunity that requires violating Shabbos may believe fully in Hashem and his directions to keep Shabbos, yet the opportunity may come to represent income, advancement, or the ability to support a family. That opportunity then appears to be the source of security instead of Hashem, while Shabbos appears to stand in the way. That is the serpent's, or the yetzer hara's, reframing. The prohibited path is presented as the path toward the person's good, and obedience appears to require deprivation. In Chava's case, the fruit is made to appear as though it contains the growth that this mitzvah denies her. The fifth step is that imagination projects a future. The serpent gives Chava something to picture: opened eyes, expanded knowledge, and a more powerful self. None of this has been lived or verified. It exists first as an image. Rav Zadok Cohen identifies Dimyon, or imagination, as central to the serpent's corruption. Applied to the sequence of the verses, imagination has moved ahead of action and ahead of das. Instead of giving form to a truth already lived, it projects an unverified future and makes that future emotionally present. The sixth step is that desire attaches to the image. Only after the serpent has supplied this interpretation does the Torah say that Chava saw the tree as good for food, desirable to the eyes, and a means to wisdom. The order matters. The promised future comes before the stated desire. The fruit now represents more than taste. It represents pleasure, wisdom, growth, and self-direction. Desire attaches not merely to the object, but to the future the object appears to promise. The seventh step is that reason begins to serve desire. The Torah does not record Chava's internal monologue, so we should not pretend to know every thought she had. However, what the verse shows is that the serpent had already supplied an alternative account of the consequence, Hashem's motive, and the fruit's benefit. Reason can now operate inside that frame. It no longer asks what is true and how to apply it. It asks how the desired path can be defended. Reason has become the attorney for imagined benefit. The eighth step is that perception changes. The tree was present before the serpent spoke. What changes is how Chava sees it. The prohibited and unnecessary object now appears good, beautiful, and capable of completing her. This suggests that perception is not always the beginning of the process. An interpretation enters, imagination gives it form, desire attaches, and reason makes it plausible. Then the object itself appears different. The fruit does not prove the serpent's story. The story changes the appearance of the fruit. The ninth and final step is action. The Torah says, she took from its fruit and ate. The alternate account is no longer only imagined. It enters the body and becomes lived experience. Had Chava refrained, that restraint would itself have been the action through which Bina became Das. It would have embodied the truth she understood. Her completion cannot be separated from Hashem. Instead, eating embodies the serpent's account. The fruit will complete me, and Hashem's command stands between me and my good. This is corrupted Das. The problem is no longer that Bina failed to become lived truth. A competing reality has been integrated through action. The person can now know one thing intellectually while feeling and living another. The proper order is Bina, action, Das, imagination, and reason. The corrupted order is different. Truth is interrupted. Imagination projects an alternate future. Desire attaches, reason justifies, perception changes, and action integrates the distortion. The serpent does not merely persuade Chava to violate a mitzvah. It teaches the faculties to function in the wrong order. The serpent promised open eyes. After Adam and Chava eat, the Torah says that their eyes were opened and that they knew they were naked. Their first recorded awareness is not of greater wisdom. It is of themselves as exposed bodies. Bereshit Rabbah records that in Rabbi Meir's Torah, garments of skin appeared as garments of light. The Zohar likewise contrasts garments of light with garments of skin. This points to more than a physical change in the body. It suggests that the body no longer revealed the inner person as clearly as it had before. Before the sin, Adam and Chava were different from one another. The body was different from the soul. The human being was different from Hashem. But difference was still experienced as part of a connected whole. After the sin, difference began to feel like separation. They could now see themselves and one another from the outside as separate bodies, rather than first seeing the inner person those bodies expressed. That is why nakedness became the first awareness. They had been naked before, but appearance did not define them. Now the outside could be mistaken for the whole person. They became conscious of how they looked, how the other person might see them, and what their exposed bodies seemed to say about who they were. Their eyes had opened to a fragmented way of seeing. They could see the difference between things without automatically seeing the unity that connected them. The Rambam in Guide for the Perplexed explains that before the sin, Adam related to reality through truth and falsehood. After the sin, human consciousness became occupied with good and bad, not only moral good and evil, but judgments such as desirable or undesirable, attractive or repulsive, honorable or shameful. That shift matches the metric introduced by the serpent. The governing question is no longer only what is true, it becomes how does this appear and feel to me? Nakedness therefore becomes self-evaluation. How do I look? How am I being seen? What does my outer surface say about me? The Rambam in his commentary to Bereshit describes another consequence. Before the sin, the human being acted to what the intellect recognized as proper, without an internally opposing desire functioning as an independent authority. After the sin, a person can know one path is true while wanting its opposite. Rav Chaim Volozhiner describes the same transformation from another direction. Evil moves from outside the person into an internal mixture of good and evil. The serpent's voice can now sound like our own, which is why this whole exercise is relevant and important, because it allows us to see what is our voice and what is the voice of the yetzer hara. The Torah gives a little detail about what Chava said to Adam. It tells us that she gives him the fruit and that he ate. But then the serpent's account has already been embodied. Chava has eaten and appears alive. Adam is not merely offered a fruit. He is confronted by another person who appears to be evidence for a different account of reality. The Torah does not give enough information to reconstruct his full reasoning. What it does tell us is that he eats and their eyes are opened together. By examining what changed, we can consciously infer something about the earlier condition. Before the sin, the faculties appeared to function with greater unity. Understanding could govern action without first passing through an internally competing imagination. Desire did not stand as an independent authority against intellect. The body expressed the inner person more transparently. Difference did not require alienation. The human being contained distinct faculties, but each remained ordered toward the whole. The repair is not to eliminate imagination, reason, desire, receiving, or the body. Each has a proper role. Imagination should give form to truth rather than replace it. Reason should apply truth rather than defend desire. Receiving should remain connected to the giver. The body should become the instrument through which truth enters life. The repair begins at the point where the corruption began, between Bina and action. When another path appears beneficial, the question is not only what I may gain or lose. The deeper question is whether I am allowing an imagined benefit to redefine what is true, and whether this action will build the relationship with my Creator, the reason I'm here, or pull me away from Him. Action is where the competing realities separate. By acting upon what we understand, especially when another option appears more attractive, Bina becomes Das. The serpent promised Chava that the fruit would enlarge her. It made the gift appear separate from the giver, from Hashem, and the command appear opposed to her good. Imagination pictured a more complete self, desire attached, reason justified, perception changed, and action made the alternate reality part of her. The structure remains within us. We can know what is true while picturing another reality that feels more immediate. The repair is to interrupt the reversal before the image becomes action, to choose the giver over the imagined promise of the gift, and to allow what we understand to become the reality through which we live. I hope you found this analysis beneficial. My goal is to continue to investigate and examine and analyze the structure of the reality of the world around us, the forces that are in it, so we can repair what has been corrupted and complete our mission here. And I think the key idea when given choices, knowing what the yetzer hara is placing before us in lieu of us fulfilling the Creator's will, is that the real question, the real either or, just needs to come back to always, does this allow me to reciprocate back to my Creator?
Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed the episode and found it meaningful, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast.